when it comes to tax season. So now what happens is that the donor in Georgia tells the nonprofit that although you fund, I'm sorry, the donor in Georgia tells the foundation that although you fund nonprofits across America, I prefer if you allocate my money towards nonprofit causes specifically in Georgia. And not only that, the more you use my specific funding for nonprofits in Georgia, the more I'll donate. And the donor in California that donated $1,000 doesn't really care where his money goes. He relies on the foundation, and that's it. Now, that being the structure, the foundation can legally use more resources or allocate more funding specifically to nonprofits in Georgia than they'd allocate to nonprofits in say Arkansas. You know, unless there's something in their charter that that says not like that. Unless there's something in the charter that says that funds are equally distributed by state or funds are equally distributed by topic, etc. But that being the structure of most foundations, it's the easiest way to look at it is if there's a limited partnership where the foundation will be the general partner, and then all the limited partners provide funding, and they share in the let's just say the satisfaction of they share in the satisfaction of better outcomes for society based on their level, based on their share they contributed. So, for example, if if there's 10 funders, all 10 funders that let's just say five of them gave 10%, and 2 of them gave 20%, and the other 3 split the other 3. Let's just say 3 of them gave 20%, the other 3 split the remaining 20%. So they all say, okay, look, I gave 10%, I get 10% of the satisfaction. The other 2 that gave 20%, okay, we get 20. We know, just a theoretical satisfaction we're just going to use for whatever it is. So that being the case, foundations don't necessarily fund in the specific manner that they say they fund. So it's very important when trying to narrow the results of these foundations, very important to take a look at what they actually do versus what they say they do. So again, we need to focus on what programs or what issues does a foundation support. Next, we need to look at what geographic location does the foundation support. And next, we need to look at what the foundation actually does. What grants have they actually given? Some more key points to consider when narrowing the results is we want to know who are the board members. What are their beliefs? For example, let's go back to our funder in Georgia and our funder in California. Okay, the funder in Georgia is a member of the board. The funder in California is not. That being said, the funder in Georgia technically would have a stronger say in what projects get funded. A much stronger say than the funder in California has. Who are the key decision makers, and what are their key linkages? If If we take a look at who the board members are, and we know where their interests lie, we know who the key decision makers are, and we know where their interests lie, and we know what their links are. We know who that we know what groups they're affiliated with. We know what societies they're affiliated with. We can get a much better picture of what they're most likely to fund. And when it comes to family foundations, we want to know what the source of the original corpus is, and we want to know what other linkages there are. And all this research will help us in determining, simply stated, if we're wasting our time with this foundation or not. It's very time-consuming and very expensive to put together 100 proposals, especially if we know that 85% of the foundations we're submitting this proposal to will not fund our nonprofit. If there's a chance, that's the game. But if we know for certain they're not going to fund our nonprofit, we're better focusing our resources on something that's more likely to provide a return. So again, we need to consider who the board members are, who the key decision makers are, what their key linkages are. And when it comes to family foundations, we need to focus on what the source of the original corpus is, and we need to know what other linkages there are. Breaking it down a bit further, we want to know the contact information. We want to know specifics about the program areas. We want to know the name of key staff contacts. We want to know what the foundation's priorities are. We want to know their giving history. And we want to know their eligibility. The giving history is also a very crucial thing to look at, because many times foundations can technically run dry. If there's a lack of interest in their cause, then there will be a lack of funds coming in to their doors. If we see a foundation has been giving $500 million a year to our specific program, not our agency in particular, but agencies that provide our specific program with the exact structure, with the exact setup. We know they've been giving, say, $500 million a year up until 2008. We look at their giving history, and we see that from 2008 and on, they haven't given anything. Now, although we fit in to their guidelines, although everything we do matches their interests, although our agency structure and our programs, the way they're administered, touch the sweet spot of the board members' hearts, this foundation most likely has run dry and there's nothing left to give. In addition to that, we want to look at funding levels. How much do they actually give to any particular project? Funding cycles. When do they give this funding? What are their deadlines? How do they review proposals? How do they review funded projects? What's the process? What's their selection criteria? And finally, are there any matching requirements? Many grants will be matching grants. Many grants will be dollar for dollar or $5 for every dollar. Do the matches have to be cash? Can they be in kind? We need to look at all those criteria when narrowing the results. Next, we need to prepare the proposal. We need to actually submit a quote-unquote nonprofit style sales pitch to this private foundation. We need to get together all the documentation that we need. What's involved in preparing the proposal? So step one, we need to step back and look at our proposed project as a funder would. Many times our agency is doing very well in 5 of the key projects that we do. And we'd really like to launch a 6th project. But there's no funds for it. Now, the 6th project would most likely be more expensive than all our current 5 projects combined. We need to look at this proposed project the way a funder would. If this 6th project actually costs more than the first 5 programs combined, is the cost justified by the impact it will have? Will it provide a greater impact than all the 5 projects combined? Is it a project that our funder would see as an important project for society? What would the funder typically look for when contemplating funding this specific project? We need to go into their minds, into the funders' minds. We know that we have a cash deficit. We know we need the money desperately to survive. We're great people. We do a lot of good work. There's no reason why 5 of our employees should have to be laid off, go on unemployment, drain the state account. But the funder per se is not really concerned about that. The funder per se is concerned about the impact this project will have, or the impact the agency has on society. They're not particularly concerned with your nonprofits. They're not particularly concerned with our nonprofits' looming threat of having to downsize. What do we hope to accomplish with this proposal? We need to think beyond the traditional quote-unquote health-focused jargon, or any other jargon for that matter. We need to, let's just take for example's sake, we need to focus on, will this project create community capacity? Will we as an agency be able to promote effective volunteerism? Will we transform the ways in which the public and private agencies work? Are we innovative in our approach